basically they're Pringles, but they're just a knockoff brand, but they're just as good.
Does Pringles know that Stackers has stolen their secret formula?
It hasn't stolen. It's a chip that's a Stacker.
Does Pringles get like 25 cents every time you sell a Stackers?
You know what? They're exactly the same. They taste fine. Hi, hello.
They could be considered the bootleg version.
Listen, our guest is here. We'll continue this later. As we always do. Hello, and welcome to episode 4 of the Wanderer's Rest podcast. As always, I am Mike.
And I am Tyler.
Oh, we switched it up this time.
Yeah.
You listened to the last episode,
I might try
how
and...
I mercilessly ripped you apart about
What? Wait, what? No, I figured I would change my my impression every time.
Okay, that's fine.
Go through my repertoire. That was a really good I am Tyler, by the way, for episode 3. Okay. Everybody loves my movie voice except for you. I think you're jealous. That's what I think.
In a world where Tyler is delusional. Okay. So, before we get into our movie voices again, because we have a problem, we're going to jump into episode 4 today with a pretty interesting topic that we have discussed briefly over our last couple podcasts as well. And basically, we're just going to be talking about what a typical fantasy setting is, as well as ways to kind of subvert different tropes and kind of make it a little bit more engaging. I guess is that probably the right word? As you move the microphone around.
I'm sorry. Yeah, that's definitely going to come up in our recording.
Wow, way to go! Do you guys see? Do you see what I deal with?
I'm determined not to. Yeah, they could definitely hear
deal
it.
With, guys?
They could definitely hear it. Okay, sorry. What were we talking about?
Oh my god! Talking about the typical fantasy setting and ways to mold it to make it a little more interesting, as well as possibly ways to make it so you can work outside the fantasy setting. So, before we begin, I think a pretty good opening, of course, is the fact that most of our knowledge does revolve around Dungeons and Dragons. And Dungeons and Dragons, of course, is the very stereotypical Tolkien-esque high fantasy setting.
I think nobody here is gonna claim that they're super well read, but I mean, outside of Dungeons and Dragons, being well read, literature, movies. I'm a film guy.
The point that I was getting to making is, even though we are pretty well versed in Dungeons and Dragons, I think you with Zordera, as we mentioned a few times, have found a pretty cool way to take the traditional fantasy setting and kind of tweak it a little bit more, where Zordera takes that, starts out, I remember in the Zordera campaign, it started out as a very typical high fantasy setting, and slowly morphed into that more sci-fi, you said you call it Agapunk?
I remember, I remember, right now I think I kind of call it more of like a science and sorcery setting.
Yeah, sorry.
Because I sort of want to blend like that hard science fiction with a low fantasy sword and sorcery.
Barsoom, right? The John Carter series?
Right, yeah.
And I said it right this time instead of John Carter.
So the actual name for John Carter is Planetary Opera. Which I think is still very fitting of that.
Really? I always thought that was just the name of a genre.
It's planetary.
Like Star Wars is a planetary opera.
Kind of, yeah. Star Wars, I guess, would kind of fall in the same way. Although Star Wars has kind of become its own thing, I think. So that's why people say science fantasy when they're talking about that. So I decided to say science and sorcery, giving homage to, my earliest inspirations, which are Conan the Barbarian and John Carter and Call of Atlantis and everything. I love that fantasy setting. And I think that it needs to be revisited as sort of like a blast from the past. I think that it was big, in the 80s and everything, when that was sort of the height of Conan, and there's still this afterglow of nostalgia that people have for Conan the Barbarian now, and it's sort of made its comeback, but it's always sort of been in...
I mean, the Jason Momoa Conan was fantastic.
The what? I've never heard of that, actually. I don't know what that is, actually. I know they made another movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger called Conan the Destroyer. I think that was the only film.
I wish you could see the face Tyler's making. I can see he's smiling, but I can see the fire raging behind his eyes.
Jason Momoa is a really good Aquaman, I think.
He's a great Conan.
He was what?
Yeah, he was Conan. Great. I'll show it to you sometime. All right, so... Yes.
I've seen it. I've seen that Jason Momoa version.
I know.
And it is...
It's so good. So, moving on.
It's cringeworthy.
How
if
good
you've
it
ever,
is?
dude, if you
Like
you've seen it,
because how good it is.
you've seen it, right?
I've seen it. Yeah.
The like opening 5 minutes.
I liked it.
They have like a Photoshop, like they show like Conan's family died, and it's like this wide shot of his village, and it just goes, and like there's big fire or something. I can't. It's been so long since I've seen it. I think it's been like 10 years.
Anyway, yeah. So it is funny though, because I feel like your settings do have a pretty consistent theme of like that sci-fi, trying to blend the two. And
Yeah.
I've been thinking a lot.
Well, I was gonna say,
Continue to cut me off.
I'm sorry. I
No, it's fine.
wanted to get
Fine.
this thought out though, because I was thinking of there's another interview with George R. R. Martin that I was listening to, and in it he talks about he believes in this like furniture theory of science fiction and fantasy, where basically when you're talking about the differences between science fiction and fantasy, you're talking about a room, right? The room never actually changes. None of the furniture changes. You basically just rearrange the furniture when you're talking about. So, like, you know, instead of Harry Potter, you know, whipping around his wand or whatever, you have Captain Kirk with a phaser, right?
Okay.
And so, like, generally everything is kind of the same. And I have a weird mixed feelings about that. It immediately makes me reflect upon my stuff, because I feel like there are things I don't necessarily agree with George R. R. Martin, because I feel like there are things that are very specific to a lot of the ideas and the themes that are put forth with science fantasy or science fiction versus fantasy. You know what I mean? And like, you know, so my blending is not so much just me trying to, you know,
reskin it basically.
Yeah, I'm not trying to reskin shit, and I'm not just trying to put rifles in the hands of soldiers instead of swords or something. I don't look at it that way. I still feel like there's like a transhumanist existential question that comes with science and fantasy, and so blending them together, you're sort of getting this like more multifaceted question about like an existential theme with science fantasy. So am I making sense? I think
I think I'm kind of on the same page as you are.
So that's something to keep in mind, you know, keep on the wall as we talk about, you know, George R. R. Martin's furniture theory. Because George R. R. Martin is of the feeling that, like, you know, fantasy, all fantasies is technically the same, and you just rearrange things around.
You're cemented as a good writer.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, that's how that.
Add 2 R's to the name.
That's how that works. I'm close. I'm TJRM.
Hey, 4.
Because I have, it goes your first name.
Last.
First, middle. I have my confirmation name.
Oh God!
That's what it is.
Actually,
that's why they have 4 names.
That is a funny segue into my point. I went to a Catholic elementary school. I went to a Catholic high school. I was never confirmed because I refused to do it. And it's funny to me that in my setting, religion is such a huge theme.
Yeah.
And I think it might also be because of my love of mythology, where my fantasy setting, the players, like the races, they are all so interchangeable. All that matters, to me at least, is the myths behind the creation of the different cultures, and I think we mentioned before about how I have the one culture that's a polytheistic and one that's monotheistic. And to me, that conflict between the two of them was always so interesting. Like, I don't give a shit if the people if the regions are human, elves, dwarves, orcs, or if they're fucking Cthulhu monsters. Like, it's just, to me, my fantasy setting, the most important part is the interaction between the gods and dwarves.
It has a very profound impact on people's culture, like from an anthropological standpoint.
Yeah.
You know, if you think that the most important thing that you can do before you go out fishing is to propitiate some storm god to, you know, fill your sails with the right wind or whatever, then, you know, that's a huge influence on your just daily life, you know?
And it's just funny because, like, I've always made jokes that going to Catholic school, I should say I'm not religious. I make jokes about it, but I'm leaning a lot towards, like, paganism.
If you want to get into a totally religious debate.
Yeah, because that's what our listeners want to hear. 2 white dudes arguing about religion.
Yeah, we can top it off with politics.
So, oh my God, white dudes.
This is
and
what the people
politics
want.
And religion, so fresh, so fresh. Anyway,
we'll get to that later.
No,
Listeners, I promise you, we will never get to that. It's not religion or politics. That's part of the topic that we have in our
only in terms of D&D.
I know.
I know. But yeah, that's always something that I've always found very interesting is that my typical fantasy, I know I've mentioned this before a lot too. I hate so many tropes about D&D races. Like, I love Lord of the Rings, I love Tolkien, but I hate the influence he's had on other areas of D&D. Like, for instance, if I have to hear another person, like, insist to me that any dwarf must be Scottish.
Yeah.
No.
You get that all the time.
And I think most of it stemmed from I can't do a Scottish accent. So when I was DMing, my dwarves, like, I had a player who's from Scotland who was playing a dwarf. So, like, he loves dwarves. I'm like, of course, you're Scottish. Of course you love dwarves. So his dwarf has this, like, very thick Scottish brogue because he does as a human being. So I'm playing, and in my campaign world, my dwarves are Russian. Because I think that's so much... To me, that's so much cooler because they live in the frozen north. They're these hardy, drunk assholes. So, like, that seems... Yeah, they... Instead
of drinking ale, they have vodka?
Yeah, they're a bunch of like, angry miners. And they all talk like this. This is how all the dwarves in my world talk. And I love
It is my smithing hammer.
Yeah. It's like,
yes, comrade.
Yeah, pretty much all comments. But it's funny to me because I always hated that. The idea of, like, the regal, dignified high elf. I hate that, too. I really do. No. I've always loved... First of all, I've always loved wood elves. Anyway, those are really cool. And when I designed the elves in my campaign setting, I do have the sort of high elf archetype. But basically, the way I did it in my world is there are the original full elves that live on their own continent away from everybody because obviously their lifespans are so drastically different. They don't give a fuck about the politics of the rest of the world because, like, okay.
You would fundamentally... I was talking about this with liches, actually. We were in the subway.
Yeah.
I was talking about this, that, like, if you could live your life on a scale, you're not talking about, like, a century,
like
if that. Right. You're talking about living millennia, right?
Yeah.
Or more, or whatever. But just being able to live for 1,000 years, you would fundamentally change the way that you live your life. And you'd be able to see things on much greater timescales. And you might be able to be more, like, minded about, I don't know, climate change or just big picture, the way that civilizations orient themselves and the way conflicts happen and how to resolve them and everything. A lich might be the best antidote to advise people on how to live their lives. Because imagine what, like... If Sararak wasn't if he wasn't such a dick or whatever.
If there was ever a good lich, like, that would be like a world-saving hero. Because he's like, all right, listen, dudes, I know where you're going. We can stop this.
Mm-hmm.
But it's...
You and I really advocate for undeath.
We do.
Really
we really do.
We're totally like...
We've totally been like...
The finer points of undeath.
Yeah, the finer points of being undead. I love necromancy. You love undeath. We're fine. So... But it's funny, because the more you mention that, I've always thought, like, the elves in my campaign... They live on their own continent. They don't give a fuck about anybody outside. And the thing is, the way their civilization works, because they live for thousands of years, they get bored. Every 400 years, all the nations of the Elvish continent have a war.
Just for fun?
Just for fun. Seriously. They're like, all right, we'll build up. It's a competition to them.
Mm-hmm.
And then they stop. They wait some more years. They build everything back up. In that time, elves can then go to the other worlds and, just, like, fuck around, like, do what they want, like, looking for other items that are important to them.
It'd be very strange to live so long to just be like, let's try killing one another. Haven't done that yet.
But the thing is, I think about it, and, like, the idea of, like, we live for thousands of years, let's just sit here and wait. Not, like, I know me personally, if I had a long lifespan, I'd be like, oh my god, let's just fucking do something.
They could devote, like, 50 years of their life to just macrame. If they live for thousands of years.
They train themselves in all these different areas. So, like, when they have these great wars, they're, like, saying, like, I've trained in these different areas and they're getting to use it. But also the idea of going in my way of subverting the traditional trope of, like, every time I see elves in fantasy setting, the traditional fantasy setting, like, they're always, like, they're the wise counselors. They have all this advice for people. I imagine that as, like, me. Do I have advice for flies? I don't give a fuck about flies. Flies live, what, a day? Think of a fly's lifespan compared to a human's lifespan.
I mean, I'm sure there are ways if I could communicate with flies I'm sure there are
Would you
ways that I
care?
could benefit
Would you
their
honestly
lives.
care? This could
Once in a while.
This could say a lot more about me as a human.
I'm the kind of
But,
guy
like-
that like takes earthworms out of the blazing hot sun on the road and puts them in the like I'm that kind of guy.
I mean, I love me some spiders, but like fuck flies.
Yeah.
Reggie lives in the lunchroom right now.
If there were human beings that were like flies and they were just a nuisance, then
But like after a
Totally.
while, when you keep
But some
seeing
people
them
might be
repeat
like
the same
caterpillars.
patterns over and over again, like wouldn't you get tired of that? Because
Hmm.
I imagine my elves are just so fucking done with the rest of like the mortal races. Because like, listen, motherfuckers, I've told you this shit 300 times. You keep fucking up. I'm done with you.
This is why people don't like liches. This is why liches turn bad.
It is again advocating for undeath. I understand why liches are the way they
Liches just get pissed like,
are. I imagine.
I've tried to help you so many times.
You know what? I'll do it myself. Boom. There. That's a perfect writing a good lich. Imagine. No, seriously. Imagine that. Imagine someone. Let's go to real quick subplot here of writing a good villain.
Good villain.
You have someone who's striving to become immortal because he wants to genuinely help the world. He makes it, becomes immortal. They don't fucking listen to him.
Mhm.
And he gets so just like, I'm so done with this, I'm doing it myself. And like his ways of doing it, everyone's like, no, he's trying to kill everyone. Alright. That's my whole thing. Yeah. So
That does sound like a bad guy before. Where he's like, I tried fixing it before. You guys, 3 strikes are out.
I mean,
We're hitting the reset button.
It's sort of in a way that the MCU presented Thanos. Why is it
Thanos.
Oh my god! You know what it is? My fucking idiot brother was making fun of me
Thanos.
last weekend by mispronouncing it. He was like, Thanos? I'm like, Thanos, you fucking idiot! You numbskull! You
You said it so many
Neanderthal."
times that you picked it up.
I did because like he kept doing it. He kept saying it on purpose to fuck with me. He's like he purposely mispronounced people's names like on purpose. Like, who's Buki? I'm like, it's Bucky. You idiot!
Spooky.
Like he's just being an asshole. So
He's talking about Garfield's
no, he's talking
teddy
about, like,
bear?
the Winter Soldier. He'd say Buki instead
Oh,
of saying
Buki.
Bucky. He's an idiot. So
Yeah.
yeah, but like that's kind of how Thanos was portrayed in the MCU. He's like, okay, I've been trying. Like even the fucking one after credit scene, like I'll do it myself when he grabs the glove. Like he's been trying to do this stuff, and I think that in a weird way, you do kind of understand him, even though he's a fucking genocidal maniac. You
Yeah.
kind of understand. He's like, I've been trying. in his
Endgame,
own-
Endgame, he goes like full off on the deep end. It's a different Thanos, but Endgame, he goes off the deep end. It's just like, I'll start a new universe.
Because the way I saw it, which I thought was kind of cool, and I think a lot of people missed the point, at least of Endgame Thanos, was that's young Thanos. That's like before he's learned, before he's disciplined himself. So he's just like, you're just dumb, I'm making a new one.
Well, it's only him from like 10 years back.
Dude,
I
10 years is
do
a long
feel-
fucking time.
I don't know. I do feel like there is some like uncatharsis that came out of Endgame by making it just a totally like kill off the Thanos that everybody was fighting against, and then bring back one that nobody's even interacted with. So like when Scarlet Witch,
Yeah.
that should have been an amazing like rematch up against
Yeah.
them, right? She should have had like a huge
There's
moment.
been a lot of great memes.
And
about
then
that.
he looks at her and it's
I
just
don't
like
even know who you are.
we talked about it before. It was like I don't even know who you are. Like man, like
Yeah.
it should have been the same Thanos,
Yeah.
definitely.
I think it'd be
Or they should have merged or something, like one from the past and like
Yeah.
got his memories of the future. I don't know, something weird. We've talked about weirder things that comic book writers have done.
Yes, we did. We had a whole discussion about the fucking
That should have totally been in the
storyline of
cards.
Forever Evil. Yeah. So going back to our thing about the fantasy setting, before we
Oh,
started
yeah.
recording, I was talking about the setting for my game, Steel Horizons, which is for those who don't know, listeners, I am developing a new tabletop role-playing game called Steel Horizons,
Mhm.
which is a diesel punk game where the aesthetic is sort of like the years between World War I and World War II, where in my setting, a great war has just ended, where these different nations are fighting over control of this mineral that is used to power their machines, their mechanized warriors, their tanks, and eventually throughout this war, Tyler and I were talking because the usual trope is the Great War ends, there's a winner, there's a loser, and then you go from there.
They
But-
romanticize the Greatest Generation, that
Yes.
kind of shit.
So Tyler brought up something which was funny because I had also come to the same conclusion separately, where Tyler was saying that what if the war ended because people were like, "Yo, everyone's dying." Like,
We got too good at killing one another.
yeah, and that brought up the whole Gundam series, which we'll bring that. I'll let you talk about that in a second.
Love Gundam.
Gundam's so good. But the idea was that these nations were like, millions of people are dying. So we need to figure out a way to mine, refine, distribute this mineral. So they all agreed to appoint this independent organization, sort of like a UN, who their job is to take control of this mineral, and they're the ones in control. Now, of course, this is going to lead to some political intrigue of different nations trying to undermine the organization or trying to take control of it. Because to me, Steel Horizons was originally set to be a 5th edition compatible system. But the more I've looked at it, 5th edition is very much based around combat, based around magic. There is no magic in Steel Horizons, and I don't see it as being a very combat-heavy game. It's more of a narrative game, more of a social intrigue, more social game. So,
see, because I thought that you had a lot of... there's a lot of opportunity there with, like, gun mechanics and cover-based shooting.
There is, and there will be combat, absolutely. Yeah. But to me, maybe this could just be because of my background as a creative writing major, but, like, I love story. And I want someone to be able to contribute to this story and not have to worry about, like, okay, I want to talk to this guy, and then you have the other players like, I swing at him, and then the combat starts, and you've lost any social encounter. Because
people are going to do that anyway.
I agree, yeah, but I don't know. That's at least what I was thinking in that regard, and that brought Tyler to talking about Gundam.
So
the 1 Day War thing.
So yeah, I like the idea of everybody's been stockpiling all these weapons. They've been building everything up. It is very Gundam, because in Gundam they call it the 1 Day War originally. When you're talking about like Mobile Suit Gundam, Amuro Ray, and Char Aznable and everything, because they've stockpiled these huge mobile suits, and then they have this like all out war one day with these giant mobile suits, and millions of people die in the first day. And the war is so bad that it just ends in this truce, this armistice, and everything. And I like that idea because that is kind of where world history was at after like the Civil War and World War I. Like you have people that stockpiled these huge weapons.
Yeah,
they were building Gatling guns, but they were still riding off into combat on horseback.
Yeah,
like in one day, just it was mass genocide. Basically,
I have to continue our trend of referencing Matt Colville because I was...
Matt Colville, call us.
Matt Colville, seriously, call us. We love you so much. So he had a great video. He has a whole politics series where he talks about different things of politics of war, politics of peace, and Tyler and I were talking about this, that one of the things... I actually have it on my computer right now. Just click the thing. Yeah, so he talks about the book On the Origins of War and the Preservation of Peace by Donald Kagan, where
it brought up like Hobbes and
you brought up the other two people.
Hobbes and there's another guy that had like the noble savage versus the violent savage idea.
Yeah, and the whole idea was basically that when left to our devices, humanity will actually pursue war instead of peace. And
it appears to be true.
It does appear to me.
Human nature is very violent.
Yeah, so when Tyler brought up the Gundam story, it reminded me of that because, like, oh my god, I'm sorry, my brain is kind of blanking for a second, and I'm kind of forgetting where I was going with that. Yeah. But, yeah, the whole idea... I just wanted to reference Matt Colville. But the whole idea
That's all you wanted to do.
That, at least, when I was thinking about these different settings, I'll come back to it probably later, but I like the idea of what Matt Colville's saying, where war isn't this, like, romantic thing where everyone's like, let's go fight for the motherland.
It's terrible.
Oh, I remembered. I'm sorry. Okay, so you mentioned about how people rode to battle with like plumage, and his comment was, if you ever wanted to see a picture of what Napoleon's army looked like in 1800, look at a picture of the French army in 1913, because they're riding to battle on horseback
in the same way,
and these gigantic plumage and like very flamboyant. And the idea was, at that time, they hadn't had the similar experiences with the machines of war that America had with the Civil War. Like, we knew what a Maxim gun was, we knew what a Gatling gun was, so like, that shit is no joke. So these guys are like, for the motherland! And then they're getting ripped apart by these fucking automatic weapons.
It's why the rest of World War I was foxholes. And just like being entrenched, 100 yards away from the enemy and staying there for a year. Yeah, because we were way too good at killing one another.
Again, in that same Matt Colville video, he mentions that Germany was ready to march through Belgium into Paris because that was the easiest way to get through, because the Paris-German border was fortified. So there was a treaty that all these nations agreed that if anyone goes through Belgium, they will attack. So Germany's like, listen, Britain, we're going to go through Belgium. just give us the stamp of okay. So Britain has this opportunity to say, like, are we going to listen to our word, or are we just like let them go? So Britain's like, no, we're not, we're going to stop you.
Mm-hmm.
Germany's like, okay, well, we're going anyway, so you can't stop us, because at the time Britain had only had the British Expeditionary Force, which was really small. These motherfuckers ripped apart the German army, and that's what made the war go on 4 more years, and millions more died. And it's really cool. But yeah, so that's my one point I want to make. Basically, just kind of bringing it all back in.
Kind of reminds me actually of the Iliad and the Odyssey, because the major theme of the Iliad and the Odyssey is basically that is like how do you resolve conflict? Yeah. Because you get to a point at the end of the Odyssey, Odysseus kills everybody that's trying to court his wife Penelope. Yeah. And it just seems like, everything's just going to start all over again. There's going to be a whole other war all over this bloodshed. And I think Homer kind of cops out and does like a Deus Ex Machina, to just like, and they all just live with the fact, that Odysseus was this huge murderer. But I think that Homer's ultimate point is that there really is no end to conflict. Odysseus had Athena to come in and do a Deus Ex Machina, but in reality, this is why conflict is so perpetual, because it's always about the thing before that and the thing before that and the thing before that, and it just goes on forever. In most
traditional fantasy settings, that's kind of the common thread too, where it's like, especially with Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. Now, let me just say, I love 5th edition. It's the first system that I've fully, truly delved into, and I really do love it for what it is. However, there are many critiques I have where, especially when I was designing Steel Horizons, it just doesn't fit for things outside of this traditional fantasy setting. It also doesn't fit for things
doing
outside.
Low fantasy.
Yeah, like low fantasy. I know people say like you can play low fantasy with 5th edition. I very much disagree because of how important magic truly is in Dungeons and Dragons. Mm-hmm. But also, the system by itself in a traditional fantasy setting for these games is very much, you go somewhere, you fight something, you come back. Which, sure, it makes for a good game.
I think we talked about that before, where you're sort of making the fantastical the mundane. Where like going out and clearing a dungeon is sort of like going shopping for adventurers.
Yeah, it's like it's being an exterminator. Like, an exterminator is a very mundane job.
Which, I love Ghostbusters, and sort of taking, like, paranormal investigator and turning into a plumber is... that has its place, don't get me wrong. Yeah. But yeah, I can see where, after a while, you do kind of want something different.
That's why, to me, some of the best games I've seen or watched have these intricate storylines where it's not always about combat. And when it is about combat, the combat means something. Mm-hmm. So it's not just like, hey... go to this dungeon and kill the goblins, and then come back. So, okay.
It reminds me of Red Letter Media has talked about this before. I love watching movies, and I love watching movie critics and everything. And their main critique about stuff today is that combat is everything, all the time. Especially if you look at Star Trek movies now versus Star Trek movies then, they were mostly, intrigue and conversation and big head pieces about the Voyager space probe wanting to transcend into another dimension or something, and now it's just phasers going off and huge space battles and stuff and just war all the time, and it doesn't have any meaning.
Even compare Wrath of Khan versus the second new Star Trek.
Into Darkness.
Yeah. The original Wrath of Khan, Kirk there's no hand-to-hand fighting.
They don't meet one another.
They never meet each other. Yeah. It's all ship to ship, which makes sense in the terms of the movie. But it's not like...
Because Star Trek is... you ever seen Das Boot? Where everything is all about sonar and radar, and they're reading their instruments.
In the final fight of Star Trek... I haven't watched in a while. I think the game's right. In the final quote-unquote fight of Wrath of Khan, mm-hmm. they're hiding from each other.
Yeah, it's this cat and mouse in a nebula.
It's not this let's go at each other, shields front, guns blazing. Kirk is fucking hiding in a nebula, mm-hmm. trying to get the advantage. And so, I love that. I love the tension of that. I love the idea where it's fuck, if Khan finds them, mm-hmm. they are dead.
It's deeply tactical.
Whereas now, in fucking Into Darkness, it's check out this even bigger Star Destroyer with guns.
It's big and black, and we're gonna crash it into San Francisco.
It's very angular, which means it's evil. Like, okay.
And of course, it's helmed by Peter Weller. You know, basically because he was RoboCop. That's all. That's
but I agree. I do think that where combat absolutely has a place in Dungeons & Dragons, but like as I've branched out more, I've seen more and more games where you don't even fight anything ever. Mm-hmm. It's completely narrative.
Social encounters. And, yeah.
Like, for instance, there's a friend of mine who I met through Critical Role, this girl Jess, who she streams. She made her own game, and they were streaming it the other night. Mm-hmm. And this game is just like you flip cards and you create a story with these card prompts.
Yeah.
That's so fucking cool.
Yeah.
Like, you don't roll any dice. There's no combat. There's no, like, oh, I use this ability that I got last level. No, like, you're... Oh, yeah, so in going back to the whole traditional fantasy setting, I love the idea of doing something where the system itself allows you to do things more than just hunt down this person, fight this boss, turn in the quest.
I get what you're getting at, because a lot of the mechanics around Dungeons and Dragons are they're combat and they're magic focused. That there's utility in how you use it, all in combat, and so it sort of limits the way that people have to interact with the world. The same thing is said with a lot of video games. Video games, you have buttons just for combat, really, and how you string together combos and everything. And so your way of interacting with the world is either talking to some NPC or hitting stuff with another button. Yeah. And so if you could think of more ways for people to interact with things, it might open up their minds to think more creatively or more imaginatively.
Yeah. And it's like, I've been...
D&D can do that.
I'm okay enough to announce this. I'm working on a new supplement that I call For the Family. Because remember we talked about... Actually, in our last episode, we talked about the Paladin. Yeah. So I had
doing it for the family.
Yeah, so I came up
It would be a shame if somebody came by and smited you.
Yeah, so I came up with this idea for these subclasses based around characters dealing with being within crime families. And I got stuck in a couple areas because I was thinking to myself, I want these guys to have abilities outside of combat, but I can't justify being the only ability you get at this level. For example, like, this one character is basically an archetype for, like, your enforcer in a crime family. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I was like, he's going to get proficiency in intimidation and persuasion. Because that makes sense to me. But, like...
Yeah, for a level, though, that's his only thing.
And it's like, it's so frustrating because most people look at these classes and their first thought... I know, even me, when I first started playing, my first thought was, well, like, how can I use this in combat? Like, am I going to intimidate someone after I hit them? And it's like, so many people don't think about the social side of everything, the social encounters. And I think in a traditional fantasy setting, we've gotten so used to combat. Like you said with video games, the gamification of tabletop games where you're thinking of it as, okay, I have these abilities in combat, I must be doing combat a lot. Mm-hmm. As opposed to, like, what can you do outside of combat? And, like, I just, like, don't get me wrong, I've had a lot of things in different games where I've had these amazing moments that happen in combat, but I've had even more amazing moments happen outside of combat, these social encounters. And, like, like, I know I had my warlock, Violetta, at one of her invocations was she cast Disguise Self at will whenever she wanted. The amount of times I've spied on people, infiltrated organizations, stolen stuff.
Right.
Like, it was crazy. Like, that's so fun to me. Like, I remember she got caught stealing something, and these 3 town guards ran after her. And I'm like, I'm a warlock, I'm by myself, I will die, or I'll get captured. So, I spent my whole turn getting as far ahead of them as I possibly could, turned a corner, and disguised self into someone else, dropped to the ground, and when they ran, I was proficient in deception, like, she went that way! And they kept going. I got out of a combat situation by not doing a single combat ability.
A lot of people don't really think about that.
They don't.
They want to, like, plant their feet and just square off against everything.
Hunger of Hadar in the middle of the town square and probably kill some civilians. Like,
right.
But I was like,
it's mostly because of what we talked about. The combat mechanics are so in depth.
Yeah.
And other mechanics for social encounters are a little bit lackluster. But I think also that there isn't so much cost to combat. Combat doesn't cost a whole lot when you get right down to it.
It kind of goes back to what you were saying when we started playing the Sin campaign, where people people very often.
I
like,
had
one
hard
encounter,
mode.
Let's go to sleep.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody's always asking like, can we take a short rest? Can we take a short rest? Can we take a short rest? And I was like, you know what? A short rest is now a day long.
Yeah.
And you'll get your short rest after a day because I wanted to have longer, protracted episodes where you would go on for days and sort of, move across the countryside, and your encounters would be the people that you interacted with and everything over that week. Yeah. And then a long rest was a week, and that is a thing. People know that as D&D hard mode. It's funny. I just lost it, but I was
very against it at first, mostly because I was so used to the way the edition is run. But like even looking at other,
you get really worried when you think about like
you do because you realize,
how am I going to survive or whatever, and I'm like, that's tension. Now you need to think about like avoiding combat because combat should extract a huge toll. Every fight that you go into, you shouldn't be sure if you're going to live or die.
And that's like when I played Zarn, my cleric. Every combat, my first attack was probably my highest level spell. Because I'm just going to get it back soon. It's not a big deal. Like,
might as well.
But it's like looking at these other games.
You need that but I might need it later. Kind of like withholding everything because you don't know what's on the next encounter and the next room.
Yeah, like the good thing is right now, my Saturday game I'm playing where it's Violetta. She's a rogue now instead of a warlock because she broke the pact, and I have abilities that she has that like we got into a couple of we're in like the final dungeon about to face down the final enemy, and we keep running into things, and I have these spells, I have these abilities. I'm like, I don't want to use it. I don't know. Like she has an oath bow, which is a weapon that when you basically recite this oath and the enemy becomes your chosen enemy.
Yeah, and then you can track them down.
Deal a lot of extra damage.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's once per day. So like I've role played it out that she brings up the bow and like she's like, no, not yet, and like because she knows that you can't if you use it now, you gotta wait a full day, and I really doubt we're gonna take a long rest in the final enemy's dungeon.
Right.
So it's
a little metagamey, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, it's cool though because in her head it's like I have these powerful abilities and these are just fucking little minions. Like we need to wait until we get to the big guy.
Although sometimes I do run into the problem where everybody was able to save everything a little too well. You get to the final boss and then everybody just unloads everything.
But that's
all
still
at
great.
Once.
That's still great to me.
It makes listen, the final battle should be climactic. If it's anticlimactic because everybody just unloads everything that they've been saving all day on this one encounter, then it's like, I mean, it's mostly me. I didn't do my job right to make people feel the need to use their spells. You should really get there and like feel spent. You should be there, like be battle hardened and bruised and I was going to get to this.
They probably are health wise, but just like
this is actually a Matt Colville thing, I think.
Oh, you're getting in on it.
I only because he referenced this. I think that he was talking about the way the way HP works, right? Your health points, and how it is kind of weird that you can get the crap beat out of you, right? And you have like 10 health points left, and you feel like you're worried that you only have 10 health points left, but for all intents and purposes, your character can operate the same, right?
Yeah,
like he's not your character's not sore at all. Like it's just he's fine until he drops to 0 hit points, and then he's on the floor. Right? And so there could be other more mechanic ways, not that, making combat more complicated or whatever, and making combat mechanics more in depth, but you should feel more, ways in which your character is sore or aching or it doesn't have the use of his arm anymore or anything because his HP is so low, taking like exhaustion mechanics into effect and everything.
I think that also has to do with 5th edition being so streamlined, but like I remember I was going to say it earlier that there are a lot of other systems that handle combat in such a different way. I think Warhammer Fantasy, you regain 1 hit point a day without medical attention.
Right.
And like that's crazy. Like
so it's not so much making combat more complicated, it's making combat more difficult. You raise the difficulty in combat.
I wouldn't even say difficult, just more
real.
Yeah, I guess real. More,
right. I'm starved of
more
of like.
I guess.
Yeah. I should say that. Yeah. I want things to be more impactful and extract such a heavy toll so that you do feel like if you're in a moment where you need to draw your sword, it is an actual life or death moment.
Not to mention, this is also kind of a bit of a personal thing, too. I've been in a fight before. I've been in multiple fights.
Mm-hmm.
You don't just end a fight like, okay, let's go. Like, there's times when you get done a fight and you're like, oh God, I can't do that again.
Yeah.
Like, and I feel like, not that I'm advocating everyone should fight someone in their life, but like, you don't understand that.
There is, but it is possible to feel a little out of your depth if you've never actually been in a fight before.
Yeah, or even, better example, sports. Sports are the same thing. Mm-hmm. I played football my entire life. After a football game, I don't want to play another football game until a week later.
Right.
Like, I don't want to do that. It's taxing.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, I think...
So, going through a dungeon should feel...
Not fighting. We'll use sports as the example.
So, going through a dungeon should feel like playing a game of football.
Yeah, or just like any sport. Any sport, any physical activity. Like, even people who go to the gym. There are many people who can go to the gym multiple times per day. That's fine. There are many others who can't. I feel like that's a pretty good example for it, too. Like, when you go to the gym and you give it your all, you're not going to be like, whew, all right, I'll be back in 2 hours. Like, no. You can't just...
Do you remember Battlesword? We did that for my birthday a couple years ago.
Yeah.
So Battlesword, for I don't know, this company they're not in operation anymore, which I feel terrible.
Think they are, because
I really hope they are, because I loved it. But a long time I have said that tourney style dueling and combat should definitely make a comeback. Jousting should be a spectator sport. Full on spectator sport. I know it is in it's in like Canada, I think, or in Australia.
Did you see it?
I've heard of it. I've never. Of course it was.
I literally think that's what it was called.
But we did Battlesword, and Battlesword was essentially that. It was like full on spectator sport. We donned armor, and we had these like PVC or polypropylene swords, the bats essentially, and we just beat the crap out of one another.
Yeah. And
it was my birthday, so everybody had to one-on-one me.
Yeah.
Obviously. And
I was the overall champion of the
dude, I got through, I think you were, but I must have gotten through like 12 fights or something. It was just 12 duels. And you're fighting for no more than, I think they had like a 2-minute timer or something.
Yeah.
Fighting for 2 minutes in full armor. With two-handed sword or katana or sword and shield, these
swords are plastic swords, by the way. Not plastic. They're the hard training swords.
Yeah, I said they're Boken.
They're
Boken. But fighting just for 2 minutes, and I don't think that I am out of shape. I don't think I was out of shape then, but it is the most taxing thing that you can do. I thought that like my heart was going to burst out of my chest that day. Every time I sat down. And then I would sit down for 5 minutes, I must have gone through 12 bottles of water because I would drink an entire one when I sat down.
Yeah.
Like you've no idea how taxing that is.
Yeah.
And you're fighting for hours. You'd have to be like, a triathlon athlete or something. Some like a crazy Olympian. In order to go through what some of your D&D characters go through
like I remember,
in a day.
So, me and another one of our friends, Bernie, we were the last two, which was also funny because we're also...
Yeah, you're both like 7-foot guys.
Yeah. So, and the funny thing was, our final battle...
If I was going to bet on a fight, it was going to be that one.
Yeah, so I ended up winning, but the thing was, at the very end of it, like, we started out normally, and like, I've wrestled my whole life, where wrestling is 3 2-minute periods where it's pretty intense.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, I was still unprepared for that. But like the first couple rounds, like you're holding your sword the right way, you're standing up. Like the very end of it, I literally put my shoulder down and just charged into Bernie and pinned him against a wall and was just trying to hit him with my sword at close range because I was so tired.
Yeah, you're just trying to use your body mass at that point.
So like
because you don't have the strength to lift your arms after a while.
So I imagine in a traditional fantasy setting, because we've gone way off topic at this point. That
I think this is definitely important.
I hope so. So in combat for a traditional fantasy setting, if you want to make combat feel real, you got to include that. Like it's exhausting. And
exhaustion mechanics would definitely help.
Not to mention some of these weapons that our characters carry.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention the fact that we're all carrying God encumbrance needs to come back because there are people who, like I had Jarek who was carrying a maul, 2 great swords, and an axe.
I think
Like, he was fucking jacked at the time.
Well,
But
I
so-
brought it up at one point during that campaign with Jarek, and I was like, we should be thinking about encumbrance or whatever. And all you guys were like, I don't know, or whatever. And I was like, all right, I guess I'll just table that discussion.
Yeah,
Like,
well, the good thing about Jarek was with his particular path of barbarian, he doubled his encumbrance, which was good. But like,
we didn't use it anyway. That's the
Nothing,
problem.
yeah.
That's why I love survival in D&D. I was like a kid in a candy store when we were playing Tomb of Annihilation, because
yeah,
doing survival and going across that grid map was like some of the best D&D that I've had in a long time.
Before, like, so one of the topics I'd written down way before we even started the podcast months ago, the idea I had was a hunting system, which is based off survival, because I would love. So okay, going back to keeping this within the traditional fantasy setting tropes sort of thing. Something that I loved playing The Witcher, because in The Witcher, people would say, a specter's haunting this village.
It's funny because
And-
Witcher is kind of a deconstruction of the standard fantasy idea anyway.
It
The
is,
Witcher, he is kind of the Ghostbuster, like, plumber of,
Yeah.
like, the world doesn't need a hero, it needs a professional monster hunter
Yeah,
kind of
but
thing.
the thing I loved about it was you would say, like, there's a specter haunting this village.
Mm.
And there's a couple times you just show up and the specter's there. But there's other times where, like, you have to gather clues and you have to hunt down what this thing... Because the thing is, you can go fight this monster and you're going to get your ass kicked. But if you do your research, you figure out in the mechanics of that game what oils it's weak against. What spells.
Yeah.
So, like, you understand its weaknesses. And I feel like...
It should be, like, nearly impossible to kill it unless you're doing that. Like, unless you know that I need a silver sword and I need this particular oil or spell.
And, like, I just wish...
Otherwise,
that-
you die.
I wish that there was more of that in D&D, because I love the survival skill. I love the nature skill, animal handling, and I know there's brief hints of it in the fighter champion subclass, I think it is, or it might just be the fighter... I'm sorry, I don't have the book in front of me, but one of the fighter subclasses has something where if you spend a minute in front of your enemy,
Oh, yeah.
you can figure out things. See,
It's basically like being Slippy from Star Fox.
Sure.
Where you analyze its health and everything, and you can... The only way that you can get the boss's health bar is through Slippy, obviously.
Okay.
I'm sorry,
So-
I'm a huge Star Fox nerd.
I know. But it's just, I think about stuff like that, and I really wish there was more of a system where you would be rewarded for taking your time to investigate. Not just like, oh, I know what this enemy is, I'm using my knowledge of the Monster's Handbook to figure it out. Like, I'm saying, like, for your characters to truly understand what's going on, which is also, in a separate tangent, which is why I like homebrew monsters. I like monsters that I don't know what the fuck it is, and I have to figure it out. To me, that's fun.
Yeah, I deal with that a lot. I got to play actually last week, and I was playing my ninja, and I knew that it was a rust monster that we were going to fight against.
Yeah.
But I had like that weird moment of just like, would my character know what a rust monster is? I guess so. He's from the Underdark. I don't know.
Yeah, that's why I always like to ask, like, can I make a history check? Like, would I know what this is? And I think that's a pretty good way to figure it out, but I wish there was a more intricate way. I mean, granted, we're also throwing more rules on something that we're saying we're trying to simplify.
It depends on like where you want your engagement in the game to come from, right? I mean, it does come down to an agreement between players and Dungeon Master over like, what's the interesting part of our game? Is it combat? Is it social encounters?
And
is
again,
it hunting?
Stressing a session 0, which is so important to figure these questions out. So yeah, I completely agree with you.
Yeah, and survival doesn't get a whole lot of love. I do wish that it was more doable in Dungeons and Dragons, but I know that there's so many things, Tomb of Annihilation. There were so many things that you had to keep in contact with. I had a checklist that I had to go through every day. Rations, water,
spray,
temperature, how you guys were moving that day and everything. And that's so many things to keep track of. And I know that it took a while to go through everything day by day, but I did like thinking about your journey in terms of those things. And I wanted to incorporate that into, Zordera, moving across Sind and larger area of Din, going like this planet trekking voyage and like how you survive instead of just boiling it down to, and you arrive in this far off country now. And,
Yeah, 2 days pass, you don't trigger any random encounters, you're there.
It's basically the same way that Tomb of Annihilation opens. Generally, you're teleported there by magic. Like that's how most people treat your travel and everything.
Yeah.
If you're not in a dungeon, you're just going to teleport to the next town.
Yeah, and I know I wish that I know I've made this mistake too, where like I've had the players be traveling from one city to another, and I know there's something in the middle that I want them to interact with. So I'll stop the travel and be like, this day you come across this thing. But I wish there was something where like you could do that for every day. Not so much to drag it out, but more or less just so like when you do stop them, like, oh, there's clearly something here. Like,
yeah.
That's why, yeah.
Cholt was definitely like that. I had to roll for random encounters every day, and it was like on a 16 or higher, or no, it was on an 18 or higher. You came in contact with just something in the wild, and it could have been anything from cannibals to zombified T-Rex, or whatever. And I kind of enjoyed that of rolling for like a random encounter, because it makes the world sort of feel a little bit more, like a living, breathing thing where you could come in contact with anything. And
what I love?
Going for a long trek is dangerous for that specific reason.
You know what I love the most about that Cholt campaign we did was we're trying to investigate, was it Firefinger, the tower?
Yeah.
When we got up to it,
dude, like 2 people died in that.
Yeah, there was those crazy bug people, right? Were they bug people?
They were the terror folk.
The terror folk were flying around, and you're telling us like if you go up there right now, they will find you.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing I loved about Cholt was the weather system.
You guys waited for a rain.
The next day, a fucking storm rolled in, and we went under the cover of the storm into this tower. Now, granted, one of our players got blown off the tower and died, but that's still cool. The idea that like, when I think about D&D, like besides like the narrative things of like it's a rainy day, like when do you ever really have a change of weather?
Yeah. It's something you don't even think about.
You don't.
You're like, it's day and it's night.
Every day in the Forgotten Realms, it's always sunny in the Forgotten Realms. Like that's.
It's always sunny in the Forgotten Realms.
Yeah, that's what it feels like. And I tried to get a little bit better.
Milk beef.
I tried to kind of do that in my own campaign. Like I wanted to add a weather system. And like, okay, typical fantasy setting, every day is sunny. You never really have rain except if you're trying to do like a rainy mood day. That's really bad. I wanted to come up with a system like how Cholt had it, where you roll for weather, and I think that's just a cool idea. And like, I tried to do hints of that, and like, my characters were going through a forest, and suddenly the area they went to was covered in snow, and the players were like, "Wait, what year? Like, what time of year is it?" One of the players did a history check, and like, it's like early fall.
He had to do a history check to figure out what season it was.
Because the thing is, like, he did a check, and like an intelligence check. He's like, "What? Should there be snow here?" Because the thing is, people are so weird about seeing weather because there's no weather talked about anywhere else.
Yeah,
so
but your characters, it's so weird because your characters live outside, and you'd think that like you're living in the environment every day, especially to somebody that's like in a pseudo medieval fantasy setting or whatever. The most important thing, you live your life by what season it is. Yeah. Season is like how you live and die.
In that particular instance, I'm like, dude, it's like late summer, early fall. Mm-hmm. He's like, why the fuck is there snow here? It turns out later that there was a young white dragon living there, and it had kind of turned the area around.
Oh, yeah. So that's another reason why you'd think of the environment.
Yeah, and that's like, and I wanted stuff like that too, because like most of the campaign, the early part of it took place within this gigantic forest. Mm-hmm. Like they were going in and out. There's a couple cities here and there on the edges, but then most of the adventure was in the forest. And I kept thinking, like, I don't want to do like, okay, you leave the city, you're at your location. Like, I want to do something about them moving through the forest, and like different parts of the forest have something wrong with them. There was a
temperature effects we don't even really think about anyway.
At all.
Have you ever been in like a mine, like an actual cave?
Yeah, it's terrible.
Like I think I've mentioned it on the podcast too before. It's the mine up in North Jersey or whatever. It's darkness is usually the thing that we think of, but it's cold. Yeah. So terribly cold. And if you're not prepared, like the environment should kind of have that sort of effect on your characters of like temperature difference. If things are too hot, if things are too cold, the environment can drastically change how you can fight now, or if you can even continue. Yeah. Like I modded the fuck out of Skyrim when I played it. I'd been playing it on my Xbox for however long, and then I finally got a PC together, and I finally played modded out Skyrim, and it was a completely different game. I'll say like that's my favorite game. Not Skyrim. But the way I modded Skyrim, I did like all these like immersion mods and temperature and diseases, realistic needs and everything. And my favorite moment, I had like this like profound moment. I was doing like Dawnguard or whatever.
Yeah.
So you're fighting vampires in one of the caves in one of the dungeons or whatever. And I had just gone through a river or something in order to get past these vampires or whatever. And I pulled myself out of the like freezing cold water, and my character was dying because like they had like a fever and everything. So I'm like just huddled next to a little campfire that I made in the middle of this dungeon, dying of this fever, and like trying to dry myself off and warm myself up in the middle. And I was like, it's the best moment I've had in a game in my entire life. I turned off fast travel and everything. I turned off my maps and my compass and everything, and it was just 100%. Me in this dungeon, and like I can't even I'm still crazy about it. It makes me want to go back and play Skyrim, and until I can get like that same experience again, I haven't touched Skyrim in so long because of it. Because I've been ruined by that experience. Because nothing will rival that.
I think it's kind of funny that like to you that's like this great experience, but like to other people like that sounds terrible. Like
hyper realism like that. Oh my god! And that's why I eat up Conan Exiles too, because Conan Exiles is kind of similar. I think a little bit. I don't think it's as great as what I had back in Skyrim, because in Skyrim it was also like you had to think exactly what you were wearing, because it wasn't just temperature. It was also if it were good at getting dry or not. Like the effects of being wet and dry were crazy. But yeah, I absolutely love that. I hated the idea, because when you're fast traveling across a map in a game, you stop really interacting with the overworld.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, like, my buddy was playing Breath of the Wild, and after a while, he got really mad about Breath of the Wild's way of dealing with fast travel and like its dungeons and everything. Like, have you ever played Breath of the Wild?
No.
I'm sorry, I keep doing that. So there are shrines in Breath of the Wild. And you go through them, and they're sort of like their own little miniature contained puzzles. And I feel like he was just digesting shrine after shrine after shrine, because he would do a shrine and then fast travel, and it was like, how can I like limit as little time as I can in the overworld to just go and do these things? Because he was just hyper consuming all the rewards and stuff from doing all the shrines and everything, not experiencing the overworld, which is kind of the main character of Breath of the Wild. It's so important. The puzzle and the shrine at the end, the dungeon, is kind of its own reward. And you're supposed to be interacting and surviving in the overworld, which is why when I was playing Breath of the Wild, it was the best decision I made was never using fast travel under any means.
Experience with Red Dead Redemption 2. I didn't use fast travel a lot, because when you travel through the road, you'll run into random people,
right,
who are either trying to rob you or trying to
and
help
suddenly
you
think like you're accumulating so many items and everything because you're fast traveling. If you are using the game, I guess, kind of how it's intended to be used without any fast travel, like suddenly traveling from one town to another is like, do I have the right supplies necessary to get from point A to point B? Because I don't know what's going to happen if I, run into this or blah, blah, blah. Like, I need to make sure that I cover my bases.
And I think in D&D, that's something that's severely missed out on. The fact that when you make your setting, if you're fast traveling them everywhere, it doesn't feel like a real world. It just feels like, I don't know. It just feels like, okay, we're just going to teleport to the next place. We'll do the next job, do the next job, do the next job. Like, even fucking Lord of the Rings, something that arguably D&D is very heavily based upon. There's no fucking fast travel. They went the wrong way at first.
Yeah, they
go
did
over the mountain. Yeah, and they're like,
we should go under it.
Yeah, go under it. Fuck you, Gimli. No. Like,
that's why everybody like makes a big shit about using the eagles and everything. Like, why don't they just fast travel to Mordor? Like, no, you're missing the point of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. Which I think if anything, that's something you should take from Lord of the Rings. The fucking terrible part of walking through nature.
Mm-hmm.
Or even fucking Aragorn, like, listen, Gimli tracking down a fucking Uruk-hai after they've taken Merry and Pippin.
That would be an amazing campaign, by the way. It's just those 3 dudes on an orc hunt. That's the best. When Aragorn, sheathes his dagger and is like, let's hunt some orc. I'm like 1,000% on board. Like, take me with you.
That's again, another Matt Colville video. When he talks about...
Matt Colville, text us.
He talks about running a sandbox versus running a railroad campaign. And his thing was that in the sandbox he's like, this DM, John, it's obviously J.R.R. Tolkien, comes up with this game, and it's The Hobbit. Because he didn't have a plan. He made this map, and these people are like, what's this mountain over here with the dragon?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, it's Erebor, the Lost City, blah, blah. He's like, and they're like, oh, can we be from there? And I'm like, oh my God, let's try to reclaim it.
Right. So
the whole thing is, they're saying, in a sandbox campaign, John he's struggling to catch up because he's making everything as he's going, because he doesn't have his stuff laid out, because he wants to leave it all open-ended. So then they go to the next campaign, which is now Lord of the Rings, and he's saying how it's a really good video, but he's saying how in the second one, Elijah, who plays Frodo,
ha 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 ha,
yeah, ha ha ha, you clearly see he does it so you can see that he's doing the Lord of the Rings references. But he's saying the second one is very railroad. It's like, you have the ring, you must destroy the ring. That's what you must do. And the guy's like, I don't want to do that. And then when eventually the
alternate Lord of the Rings, where Frodo just kind of fucks off into
so then they
Gondor for 2 hours.
Get to the point where they all split, and they said that he's now running, because he says that apparently Elijah gets so mad at Sean's character that him and his friend play a different campaign, which is then Sam and Frodo making.
Oh yeah, they split up.
Yeah. So they said that campaign is still very railroady, and Sam doesn't like it. That's why he turns on him in the end. It's actually funny.
Lord of the Rings is the original. Don't ever split up the party.
Yeah, but then they're talking about how his other friend Viggo, obviously fucking Aragorn. So he says him and his 2 friends are having a great time because their campaign is this sandbox of them reuniting the human kingdoms, hunting down the orcs, and it's like it's funny you mention that, because that's what that reminds me of. Where that's a really fun, cool idea for a campaign, just hunting down an orc part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I my big influence for the beginning of Sindh is I really wanted to do that, Alexander the Great chasing, I can't remember this guy's name, but chasing his mortal enemy across the desert, and sort of they're always one step ahead of him, and just going on this crazy hunting trip, basically, where you're constantly chasing or being chased.
Yeah.
Also is an amazing campaign idea. It's being a fugitive in D&D.
Which is one of the only things I liked about Out of the Abyss. I did not like that module. I haven't even read it. I don't think I had a really good experience with when I was playing it. But the one cool thing about it was when it opens up, you're drow slaves and you escape. And throughout the campaign, these drow slavers are hunting you down. And
but you have to... Oh, do you have to be a drow? You don't have to be a drow.
No.
You're just a slave.
You are captured by drow.
Right, okay.
So you're whoever you want to be. And you eventually escape. You're making your way through the Underdark. It has a lot to do with demons and stuff like that. And the whole time, these drow slavers are still hunting you. They're trying to get you back.
Cool.
So that's a kind of an existential threat. Man, we need to rest. Fuck, those guys may still be right behind us right now. Can we rest here? Should we rest somewhere else?
Mm-hmm.
Do we have enough time? That part was cool, but the rest of the campaign, I don't know if it was just the game I was in, but it was just really boring to me, because it felt very much like, let's go down this tunnel, we fight troglodytes. Let's go down this tunnel, we fight Myconid. Let's go down this tunnel, we fight Myconid troglodytes. It was just
Myconid troglodytes.
My character, I built a character who had this really cool backstory.
Mm-hmm.
Never got to use it.
It's a shame too, because the Underdark is so it's so underused.
I also realized too that the backstory I made for him had no place in the Underdark. He was from his other kingdom, and he was in love with someone. It was taken away. He had his ancestral sword. The fucking sword was taken away before my first session, so the sword I created couldn't even use it. And he kept dying because he was a monk, and I'm like, this is all right. I'm done. I'm not done. I'm so done with this right now. But again, I don't know if that was just that particular campaign or if that was just the module in general. But I don't know. I just didn't really click with me.
We're coming up on hour 4.
Okay, well,
I almost did my common thing of saying a minute.
Yeah,
when it's actually an hour. I don't know why I do that.
It's a little weird. Yeah, why don't we wrap up here? I think it's a pretty good stopping point. I know we went on a couple different tangents, but I feel
what's
like
the takeaway here?
The takeaway here is that there are so many ways to subvert the typical fantasy setting trope. Whether you want to do it through different ways of handling combat, different ways of world building, different ways of social encounters. I hope we've given you advice or examples of things you can take away to help make your fantasy setting seem a little bit different. Whether it's taking the races and making them act differently, whether it's adding new mechanics to combat, whether it's trying a new system in general. Like, for instance, like how we talked about how Zordera starts out as a D&D setting, but then migrates into something different. I think those are all pretty good takeaways, and I'm hoping that our listeners are getting pretty. You're
making me rethink like the way that you interact mechanically with Zordera. I got a lot of good ideas.
Yeah, and that's all. That's all I'm doing. Trying to inspire everyone. Yeah. So
everybody should be doing the same thing with their settings as well.
I think with your setting you're making, which is why I always strive to tell people to homebrew. I know homebrewing is a bit of a challenge. Even if it's that, take a module and reskin everything, rename it, make it yours. I do that all the time. Like Princess of the Apocalypse, I've reskinned that so many times for my own campaign settings because I fucking love that adventure. But yeah, just start there and then build out from them. I think that's one of my biggest takeaways. There's so many ways to make your setting unique as opposed to just Scottish dwarves, regal elves, and all orcs are bad guys with Cockney accents.
Yeah, and I don't think that was. I mean, I don't think that was Tolkien's original intent for everybody to take away with dwarves and elves.
I don't think so either.
I think that he was kind of trying to do his own thing and.
I mean, granted, it's very heavily based off of the Industrial Revolution as well, which is why you have the orcs who are the Cockney accents, because of all the factory workers.
Yeah.
But, yeah, that's a whole other topic, which I would love to talk about maybe another day. But, yeah, so why don't we go into our little wrapping up phase. For those of you guys who are not aware, we obviously have our Twitter account, which is at WanPil Games, WANPIL Games. We have a Patreon where you can support us, which is patreon.com/WanPil Games, spelled the exact same way. As of right now, we do have 2 goals on our Patreon. We have a $50 goal and a $100 goal, which both of them are specifically geared towards paying for art and making commissions.
Yeah. So at this point, we're not even thinking about how we pay ourselves. We're thinking about in what way we can give back to you guys.
That's the one thing I want to stress a lot. Anything we make, whether it's making from buying our products or supporting us Patreon, none of it goes to us. All of it goes to whether it's commissioning art, because the $50 goal is a smaller, maybe black and white photo. The $100 art would be a full page color photo. Any proceeds we get from buying our stuff on DM's Guild, of which there's a couple things I'll go into in a second. Any of those royalties, I'm using them to buy other products to help support other writers as well.
At this point, we have to invest everything back into
everything that's on DM's Guild goes right back into DM's Guild again. For instance, I'm going to do a little rare cross promotion here because it's a product I really do love and I'm using it a lot. There's a guy on Twitter, and
of course we are in no way affiliated with this.
We are not affiliated with him. It's just a product that I genuinely like and I've been using it. In terms of a creator resource. I apologize, I'm blanking. Here we go. His name is Nathaniel Roux, Roux. He also created an otter.
I think that would be Roux.
Roux? Maybe Roux.
I think it's French.
I don't know, actually. You know what? He is French. I think he actually is French because he tweets stuff in French and he makes his stuff in French.
That makes sense.
Nathaniel Roux. That's better. Okay. So he made a otter race, which is amazing. But also he has what's called these content icons, where they are basically these pictures you can add onto the covers of your products that say, like, what's within them. Mechanics, subclasses, monsters. And I've been using them. They're amazing. So I would recommend that. But also going to our products. As of right now, we have a lot of pay what you want free stuff for just one-off subclasses. There are 2 one-shots, Temple of the Deep and the Devils in the Details, which are both $1.50 each. But also, should you choose, both of those adventures as a part of a larger story can be found in our module Against the Tide of the Pirate King, which was released, this is currently July 2nd, was released last week, June 24th. To some pretty good success, which is a full adventure module setting place in an area I call the Middle Islands, where you are tasked with rallying the forces of the free cities of the Middle Islands to fight back against this figure known only as the Pirate King.
Mhm.
It's $7.99 as of right now, and I think I had a lot of fun writing it. I've gotten a lot of good feedback from it, so I hope you guys do check it out. I know, Tyler, you have your Sind Race Pack, which is coming out within the next couple of weeks.
I think in a week or two.
In a week or two.
Set to release.
Yes, he has been releasing some great art. I was just talking about it with him before we started podcasting.
It's okay.
Shut up. It's good. It's good. All right. Also, we are on Instagram if you want to get those. I feel so weird saying Instagram, but it's actually really good. Fucking social.
You want us to gram you?
I used to shit on Instagram so much, but like I really do like it now. Yeah. So on Instagram, our handle is also, I believe it's the same thing.
One Pill Games.
I believe it's also One Pill Games. Give me a second. I'm just double check. Yes. Also, Instagram.com/OnePillGames. All of this information, everything we've just discussed, can be found in one specific place, which is our website, which is Wandering Pilgrim Games, all one word, .squarespace, one word.com. And you can find our blog posts of our different updates. You can find links to everywhere this podcast can be found. You can find links to our products on DMs Guild. You can find links to our Patreon. Everything is there. So that's probably the best resource to go to. Ignore everything else I said. Just go there.
Just go to our website.
Go to our website and figure out everything.
I think our Twitter's a little bit of a hub too.
I think so. Yeah.
We always
our
make sure.
Our website and our Twitter are probably the two biggest hubs.
If you ever want to know what's going on, specifically,
yes,
New Jersey GamerCon. New Jersey GamerCon's coming up. I'll be there the 27th and the 28th. I'll definitely be hanging out with my friends. I've got a game that's going on. I'll be playing that Saturday night. What is it? The 28th at 11 a.m. I will be dungeon mastering my own homebrew one-shot. It should be wild. I don't have a title for it. I was actually thinking about a title for it on the way here. But I'll release that one-shot also.
Tyler's one-shot. Yeah, we can talk about it more like episode 5 or whatever when I can think about a proper way of. Yes, you said this is the weekend of the 27th and the 28th.
Yeah, 28th is my game.
Yeah, so July 27th, 28th. As of right now, that'll be the week after my wedding. I would love to be there.
I understand you guys don't want a honeymoon at
we do not
the New Jersey GamerCon
Marriott in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. No. Yeah, so anybody in South Jersey or nearby, please do come by and check us out. We'd love to meet you. As well, this is way in advance, but I know I will be there. I think you might be there as well. I will be attending PAX Unplugged for the third year in a row because it is my favorite convention.
That's a ways off, yeah.
That's in November. I'm just getting some buzz going. Yeah, if you have not gone, it's an amazing convention. It's
absolutely.
It's all about board games, tabletop games, hence the Unplugged.
Yeah, there's so many things that you can't see it in a day. It really is a good for a weekend pass. I think
this is the third year it's been around. I'm happy to say I've been there since its inception, and it's oh my god, I love it so much. It's one of my favorite conventions.
Yeah, I agree.
So a lot of cool people show up at PAX Unplugged. I know. And
of course, it's in Philadelphia too. It's right away from Reading Terminal Market.
It's great. Reading Terminal Market has
Chinatown.
There's a place called. All right, real quick. I'm sorry we're wrapping up, but real quick, there's a place called Denix.
We're just advertising Philadelphia at this point.
So within Reading Terminal Market in Philadelphia, there's a place called Denix. It has the best roast pork broccoli rabe sandwich I've ever eaten. It's amazing.
Huh?
Yes.
I didn't know about this.
How do you not know about? Okay, we're gonna. You know what? That's gonna be our ending argument because. Okay. So,
apparently, we're just going to get straight in the car right now and just...
We're going to the next.
Right now.
The good thing is there's a second location here in this town, so I can bring you to it and we'll eat there too if you want to.
Oh, okay.
Maybe. Probably. Well, I'm kind of poor. So, anyway. Yeah, so that's all of our announcements. So, PAX Unplugged way in the future. NGD GamerCon coming up relatively soon.
Worth looking forward to.
We will hopefully be tweeting about it and gramming. Are we going to settle on gramming?
Yeah, we got a gram.
Okay, we're in a gram.
I got art coming out, boy.
Get that gram, boy. All right, so follow us on all those sources. Check out our website, and I'll have links to everywhere. And as always, guys,
keep wandering.
But seriously, you've never had roast pork or broccoli rabe from Denix.
I'll tell you what I have had: Pringles.
Oh my God, Stackers are literally the same as Pringles. There's no difference. They are exactly the same. They're just look at the little man. Look at the little singing Pringle. That's right.
We have
Pringle. Sorry. Look at the little singing stacker chip.
We have that. It's called a wannabe.
Okay, it tastes exactly the same. Clancy's Stackers, the original.
Clancy Stackers.
Look at that singing potato crisp. Look how happy he is.
Hey, Mike, once you pop, can't stop.
I know, Stackers are so good.
We look good because we know where to go now. We check levels. These are super important for us to record. Recorded. Maybe one day we should edit this stuff together into a theme song. Yeah, we could do that.